G'day guys, it's Omega back with another video. I want to talk about why I'm a nationalist. I'm an Australian nationalist, and I find it really nauseating that there are groups, cultural Marxist groups, that try and shame people or somehow make people think it's a bad thing to wave the Australian flag. They've actually tried to perpetuate the idea that if you wave the Australian flag, that makes you some sort of bigot. Which is absolutely absurd. Now, there are a few different factors, I think, which are involved. I mean, the first thing is, people have bled. People have died in the tens of thousands, if not the hundreds of thousands, to maintain the Australian way of life. To give us, our forefathers have died and bled in various battlefields of war, etc., so that we have the quality of life that we now enjoy here in Australia. Okay, and so as a nationalist, my agenda or my ideology in that is, I want to maintain the Australian way of life. I want to maintain its traditions. What's important to Australia. And I think that if people want to come into Australia, they need to respect the Australian rule of law, the Australian way of life. Again, it's something that has been bled for and died for. And I think there's a massive generational gap. I mean, we've got a generation, I know people who fought in World War II. We've got people in the middle, and then we've got these younger people. And in this, world of information, there are so many conflicting ideologies and so much propaganda. If you, like I said, if you, wave the Australian flag, you're a bigot. That's this idea that's propagated by some of these cultural Marxist groups. And so what's the alternative to being a nationalist? I think as far as trade goes, now some globalist trade can benefit the nation in a nationalistic way. So globalization isn't completely bad. Unfortunately, most of the globalists and people in control of that are incredibly evil. That's one of the big problems. But we've got these huge generational gaps. So you've got young people who say, who grow up and, we should have this, a free country, and we've got to free the refugees, and we've got to do this, and we've got to do that. Okay, that's fine. But what experience do they really have in life? They think they know a lot. You talk to these people, they think they can tell you about the universe. They think they can tell you about theology. They think they can tell you about, how countries should be run and what political ideologies we should have. But they've actually done nothing. I mean, now, why do I hold the views that I have? Okay, I'm a father. I want to protect my children. I want my children to grow up in a prosperous country, a safe country, and give them every opportunity I can possibly give. Now, inherently as a father, I do that to the exclusion of all others. Okay? And if you're a father or a parent, you'll understand what I'm talking about. The world is not a forgiving place. The world is not a nice place. We have what we have in Australia, like I said, because it's been fought for. People have died so we can have what we have here in this country. Now, unlike a lot of these virtue signaling white knights who say we need to go and free all the people at Nauru, and we need to do this and we need to do that. And don't get me wrong, I do feel for some of those people. Unlike them, I have actually gone to third world countries. Okay? I've travelled to third world countries. I've travelled to the largest Islamic country at least 3 times, the largest Islamic country on earth, and done humanitarian work for people. I've actually seen what countries look like when they don't have what we have here in Australia. And a lot of that is because of the ideologies that they have in those countries. Those ideologies have created all that dysfunction. Those ideologies have created all of that dysfunction. Now, like I said, you've got these people on Nauru, but it's important to understand that these people have tried to enter the country illegally. And as a country, we have every right to tell people that if you want to enter this country, you need to do it legally. There needs to be a legal vetting process. You need to go through the process that everyone else goes through. Now, people talk about, yeah, but the world, there's suffering and there's, people are dying in these countries. That's all very, very true. But like I said, what makes you think that this world is some sort of forgiving and loving place? It's not. It's not a forgiving and loving place. And to be honest, we need to be able to look after our own before we look after every other country on earth. There are, if you look at the closest Asian countries to Australia, Australia's got a population of 27 million. Just these countries, which are far smaller than Australia, 400 million people. What do you think is going to happen if we relax all of our immigration laws and these people start flooding into the country? What do you think is going to happen when I, as a father, have to try and get a job to support my children, and all of a sudden there's masses and masses and masses of refugees pouring into the country that I have to now try to contend with to get jobs? It's and it's fine for these people who are in universities and don't have kids. Like I said, these generational gaps breed these ideological differentiating ideas, but it doesn't change the truth of it. And as a nationalist, as an Australian, I've also got seeing what I've seen. I don't want groups of people coming to the country whose whole ideological mindset is a hatred of my culture. I mean, why should I let these people come into the country? And most people who most of the people who advocate a lot of this stuff don't actually understand the theology. They don't actually understand, like, for example, in Islam, it's a sin. It's a sin to assimilate to Australian culture. If you're a true practicing Muslim, it's a sin. I mean, how can somebody assimilate to Australian culture if it's classed as a sin? Now, I would much rather, as an Australian nationalist, take care of the Aboriginal population within my own country. And the Australian government obviously has have given land grants back to the Australian Aboriginals. They have given mining royalties back to the Australian Aboriginals. Why shouldn't we be looking after them before we're looking after people from other countries? Because they've suffered too. And and to be honest, a lot of white people have suffered as well in this country. Most, as you know, and as everyone else knows, this was a colony at some stage, and most of the slaves that were here in Australia were white. They were convicts. They were people that were displaced from England, taken from their homes, taken from their families, and forced into labour. And if they tried to escape, they were shot. But no one seems to care about that. No one seems to care about white blood, or the fact that whites were hunted down and shot if they try to escape and used as slaves, because that was also that's happened to us here. But I just wanted to throw some ideas out there. I want people to understand why I want to keep my country as it is. And, I sympathise, with America. I mean, with, for example, the Mexican situation. There is nothing racist at all about a country saying that if you want to enter our country, you need to do it legally. You can't just waltz into a country. You can't just walk into a country without a visa, without paying any sorts of dues. I mean, People have worked, people have toiled, people have died to make a country what it is. You cannot just walk in from another country on the gravy train without a visa, without paying any sort of dues, illegally, and then complain when the country says you're an illegal immigrant and you need to leave. And to be honest, like I said, we're given the numbers of people on planet Earth, in neighbouring countries. It's, opening up borders, these extreme groups. I mean, what's the opposing extreme group to nationalists? What do they call them? The anti-fascists. So anyone that wants to maintain normality and culture in their own country is all of a sudden a fascist. Well, these people believe in no borders and no nations. What do you think's going to happen? Honestly, what do you think will happen? What do these idiots think will happen? What will happen? It's going to be a new world order. There's going to be a monopoly on food created. There's going to be a monopoly on power, a monopoly on security. And much like we're seeing in Europe, I met a guy from Holland the other day and I said, can I interview you? And he was a lovely young man. And I spoke to him, and he was very much a moderate in his political views, but he said the reality is people are scared. They're scared when they're talking about the EU is talking about removing our borders. We're scared because we can't maintain our own culture and identity, even our own race. And I think people have a right. To want to protect their countries, to protect their traditions. A, because they've bled for them. B, because if we just opened up all the borders, the sort of chaos that we see all across the world, the sort of violence will just become commonplace in our own countries. And like I said, I'm a father. Now I'm married to an immigrant. I am married to an immigrant. She entered the country legally. It was a long legal process. I've had to go through all of that. I met my immigrant wife while I was working overseas as a humanitarian. And, the left will watch my videos, they'll look at me and they'll paint me as they don't know anything about me. But I've been around enough and I've seen enough to know that we need to start looking after our own countries. Until you can look after your own country, until you've locked that in, you can't help anyone else. Like I said, this world is a very unforgiving place. There are just too many human beings on the planet to maintain the way of lives that we have in our particular countries, and all these virtual signalers are all living in ivory towers. They're all rich people in ivory towers. These celebrities make me sick. Living in their ivory towers with their security guards, with all their wealth and with all their money. They're not going to live in the communities, are they? They're not going to live in the communities full of immigrants. It's not going to be like Germany for them, where they can't send their own kids to school because their own kids are walking to school and getting mugged and attacked by immigrants who feel disenfranchised because they've come to this country expecting some utopia and have found that they have to come and actually work and earn their way in life. And they're disenfranchised and they're becoming violent. They've said that then they refuse to assimilate to the culture. And it's become a huge problem. This is and not being able to actually have open discussions about this sort of thing, not being able to have actual open and honest discussions about the realities of this is what has led to populist politics. That's why we've got Wilder. That's why we've got Le Pen. That's why we've got Trump. That's why we've got Brexit. That's why we've got Hanson in Australia. That's why we have all these things, because as much as these socialists and these young people, and as idealistic as they are, if they, want this sort of world where we can all hold hands and everyone can have a fair go, that's not life. That's not reality. And perhaps when you grow up a little bit, you'll come to understand that and see that the world is just not like that. This is Omega, and I'll be back soon with another video. Cheers for listening.